a scientist who set out to prove telepathy, then vanished without a trace. Jacobo Grinberg, a Mexican psychophysiologist who spent decades studying non-local consciousness and working with shamans who claimed to heal with nothing but a mountain knife. His experiments hinted at a hidden connection between minds, even catching the attention of Project Stargate, the US government's secret supernatural and psychic research program. But before his work reached the world, Jacobo disappeared. Was he silenced by powerful interests, or did he simply trust the wrong person? Jacobo Grinberg was born on December 12, 1946, in Mexico City, Mexico, over a year after World War II. He was born into a family of Jewish and Mexican descent. As a child, he was curious about how everything worked. He built radios using bulbs, hobby gas planes, and blew up his home backyard with a homemade firework bomb. That kind of curiosity set him apart from most children his age. Life seemed normal for Jacobo, until his mother's brain tumor diagnosis changed everything. For 5 years, Jacobo took on the role of caregiver for his mother, a burden that shaped him long before most children faced such responsibility. By the time she passed away when he was only 12 years old, much of his childhood innocence was gone. This could have been one of the many sparks to his lifelong fascination with consciousness and the hidden power of the mind. At the age of 16, 4 years after losing his mother, Jacobo was sent on a trip to a kibbutz near Gaza to rediscover his Jewish roots. There he met his first wife, and as she would later recall, he first felt the pull of the mysteries that would shape the rest of his life. While on the kibbutz, Jacobo met an English spiritist skilled with the Ouija board, his first real brush with the unknown. During one session, the spirit spelled out a prediction: tomorrow at 1 p.m., your clock will stop. The next day, at exactly that time, his clock stopped. This eerie experience ignited Jacobo's lifelong fascination with the mystical. Jacobo's curiosity about consciousness led him to study psychology at Mexico's top university, UNAM. There, he immersed himself in the science of the mind. By age 24, his search had taken him to New York City, where he joined the Brain Research Institute at New York University to explore psychophysiology, the bridge between mind and body. During his time at NYU, Jacobo and his friends began experimenting with psychedelics like LSD, seeking to experience states of consciousness beyond what psychology textbooks could explain. Jacobo once told his close friend Tere Vale about one of his most dangerous personal experiments with fate. He said, "Sometimes I'd leave my apartment in New York, get on my bike, close my eyes, and ride across a street full of cars. If I made it across alive, I knew I was meant to be here on Earth for a reason." In the 1970s, Jacobo began researching what he called extraocular vision, the ability to perceive without the eyes. He worked primarily with children because he believed they were more open, less conditioned by preconceived notions, and therefore better able to develop these abilities than adults. Through meditation and body awareness practices, some children appeared to read words on a piece of paper without ever looking at it, even the backs of closed books. Jacobo reported that some participants claimed to see as many as 12 different realities layered over the world. In 1976, at a conference at NYU, Jacobo met Margarita Lopez Portillo, the sister of Mexico's president, Jose Lopez Portillo. She told him, "Jacobo, I'm going to help you with your investigations more than you can imagine." True to her word, Margarita invited him to Los Pinos, the presidential palace, where he was introduced to Pachita, the legendary healer known for her mysterious psychic surgeries. Pachita explained the kind of work she did, and Jacobo couldn't help but wonder what a woman like her was doing in the halls of power. She invited him to witness her work in person at her home, and what he saw there would change him forever. Jacobo watched as Pachita performed surgeries that defied conventional medicine. opening bodies and skulls, removing vertebrae, organs, and foreign objects, all without anesthesia or modern instruments. Her tools were a mountain knife, a rosary, her assistants, and her hands. Pachita claimed she was a psychic medium, channeling the spirit of Cuauhtémoc, the last Aztec emperor. Whatever the explanation, Jacobo's view of human potential would never be the same. After this experience, I don't dare claim the mind has limits. It seems we live in a vast continuum, and we don't know its extremes. This experience convinced Jacobo that there was more to life than science had yet explained. He documented his time with Pachita in his book, Los Chamanes de Mexico, one of more than 50 books he would write. Before publishing, however, he was warned by the Mexican government not to mention that Pachita had performed surgeries inside Los Pinos, the presidential palace. For Jacobo, this created a dilemma: tell the full truth and risk political backlash, or leave out a detail that gave the story even more legitimacy. This experience also put Jacobo between two worlds. For shamans, he was a scientist. For scientists, he had become a shaman. This tension would follow him for the rest of his life. Jacobo developed what he called Teoría Syntergica, the Syntergic theory of consciousness. At its core, it proposed that reality is woven into a universal lattice, a kind of invisible field containing information, energy, and order. Jacobo proposed that neurons in our brain act like antennas interacting with this lattice. When neurons fire together, they generate a coherent electromagnetic field, essentially a neuronal field. This field interacts with the universal lattice, creating interference patterns. Consciousness, Jacobo argued, is the observer, the central processor that reads these interference patterns. The result of reading is what we experience as perception, thought, and ultimately reality itself. In 1935, Albert Einstein, Boris Podolsky, and Nathan Rosen published what became known as the EPR paradox. They described two particles that interact, then fly apart, yet remain mysteriously linked. According to quantum mechanics, those particles stayed entangled, linked in such a way that if you measured one, you instantly knew the state of the other, no matter how far apart they were. Einstein hated this idea. He called it spooky action at a distance, and argued that there must be hidden variables, some pre-existing information that determined the result in advance. Otherwise, he said, you'd believe information travels faster than light, which relativity forbids. For decades, this was just a thought experiment until physicist Alan Aspect put it to the test in the early 1980s. Aspect's experiments with entangled photons showed that quantum mechanics was right. No local hidden variables could explain the results. Spooky action was real. From this, Jacobo Grinberg hypothesized that if two particles could be entangled, two human brains could be as well. To test his Syntergic theory, Jacobo designed one of his most famous experiments, a transferred potential test using Faraday cages. Two participants would first meditate together for 30 minutes, focusing on each other to strengthen their connection. Then, they were placed in separate Faraday cages, each lying on a bed, completely isolated from one another and from any outside interference. One participant was exposed to a flashing light stimulus. As expected, their EEG showed peak activity in the occipital lobe, the part of the brain that processes vision, confirming normal brain response. But when Jacobo and his team reviewed the EEG of the other participant, who sat in total darkness without any light stimulus, they found something astonishing. The second participant's brain produced a nearly identical response at the exact same moment, mirroring the first subject's brain wave pattern. Jacobo concluded that this was not a signal sent from one brain to another, but the non-local collapse of a shared wave function. Two brains behaving like entangled particles. In principle, he believed that this might even allow for message transfer using patterns of light, and he began planning even more ambitious tests. Jacobo had prepared to repeat this experiment on a much larger scale, linking participants in Mexico City with others in India, separated by over 15,000 kilometers apart. The teams and equipment were ready. He believed that this would be his most definitive proof yet, but before it could happen, Jacobo disappeared. And Jacobo's research wasn't happening in a vacuum. Declassified CIA documents reveal that one of Jacobo's papers was mentioned in Project Stargate, the top-secret US government program that investigated extrasensory perception that included telepathy and remote viewing. Project Stargate's mission was simple, but extraordinary: determine whether psychic phenomena could be used for espionage. The program tested remote viewers who claimed that they could describe locations, objects, or events thousands of miles away. Jacobo's work referenced in these files suggests that US intelligence was aware and perhaps even interested in his research into consciousness and telepathy. Some researchers now wonder if his experiments, including the Faraday cage telepathy studies, may have drawn unwanted attention from powerful institutions. November of 1994, after attending a Costa Rican conference, he came back nervous and depressed, with a different behavior than usual, according to his family members. He was taken to the hospital with a diagnosis of panic due to stress. He relayed to his brother, "If something happens to me, I am relying on you." A month later, December 8th, 1994, Jacobo Grinberg vanished without a trace. He was preparing to travel to Nepal to attend a meditation retreat led by Tibetan teacher Siki Rinpoche on December 12th, his birthday. His daughter called that day hoping to speak with him, but his assistant said Jacobo had already left. That same week, Jacobo missed his own scheduled seminars, something he had never done before. None of his students, colleagues, or family saw him again. He left no notes, made no calls, and stopped all communication with his lab team. Even more unsettling, there was no activity on his credit cards or bank accounts after that week. 3 months later, his disappearance was finally reported to the police. But by then, any trail was cold. According to his family, it wasn't unusual for Jacobo to take off without warning, but this time was different. This time he never came back. The disappearance of Jacobo Grinberg quickly became one of Mexico's most puzzling mysteries. Lead investigator Clemente Padilla, considered one of the country's top detectives, was assigned to the case. When police searched Jacobo's home, they found everything perfectly in place, as if he had never left for a trip. It was as though time had simply stopped. But one detail stood out. The hard drives from his computer were gone, along with disks, notebooks, and research papers. One of the first theories focused on Jacobo's wife, Maria Teresa, who were referred to simply as Teresa in this video. Friends and family remembered Jacobo saying unsettling things about his marriage. Like, "I can no longer stand Teresa. I'm on bad terms with her. I'm scared of her. I don't sleep at home anymore." Jacobo had been living in a Volkswagen bus he outfitted with a bed and essentials. Friends claimed Teresa had violent outbursts, and Jacobo confided to his brother, "If something happens to me, I'll count on you." On December 13th, just days after Jacobo vanished, Teresa called the lab with a startling message. It said, "Jacobo will not be returning to the lab. We're going on a vacation to Campeche, Mexico, and then to India." But investigators could find no evidence to support that claim. There were no flight records, no airline tickets, and no proof Jacobo ever left Mexico. Teresa's account simply didn't add up. On December 18th, days later, she was cashing checks at the bank and visiting the house. she appeared in surprisingly good spirits. Over a month after Jacobo's disappearance, the caretaker reported seeing Teresa and a mysterious blonde woman removing a dining table, belongings, and even the family dog. In desperation, Padilla even bugged Teresa's phone, an illegal move that uncovers suspicious calls to Gerardo Morales Alonso, a school security guard with military training and a black belt in karate, who was said to have done odd jobs for her. Yet when questioned, Gerardo flatly denied knowing Teresa, despite phone records proving otherwise. There were also calls between Teresa and her mother. Her mother claimed she hadn't spoken to Teresa since 1982, but investigators uncovered phone records proving otherwise, with the last call logged on May 10, 1995. Around this time, Teresa was spotted in several cities where she had family connections, including Rosarito, Baja California, but each time police arrived, she was gone. Padilla came to believe she knew in advance when investigators were coming. The case was going cold until the public stepped in. In June of 1995, Jacobo's daughter Estucia appeared on a popular Mexican TV show called Siempre en Domingo, which translates to Always on Sunday. First to promote her band, and then to plead for help finding her missing father. The broadcast struck a chord, and soon hundreds of tips poured in. One stood out. A janitor in Boulder, Colorado, claimed he saw Jacobo, Teresa, a blonde woman, and 2 FBI agents arriving on a private plane before being whisked away in 2 cars. Around the same time, a gas station attendant reported seeing a white Cessna land between 8:30 and 9 a.m. in the morning. 2 passengers stepped out, a bearded man and a shorter dark-skinned woman. Both, he said, were met and escorted by men he recognized as FBI agents who regularly fueled at his station. Adding to the intrigue, investigators uncovered papers suggesting Jacobo had in fact traveled to Boulder before, to conferences that were never publicly announced. Detective Padilla requested flight records from the FBI, but received only partial information. Just one record of Jacobo traveling to New York in November of 1999. Requests through the US Embassy produced conflicting data. Padilla began to suspect that someone was deliberately obstructing the investigation. Soon after, he was abruptly removed from the case, forced to resign after being accused of grand theft auto, charges he insists were fabricated. Padilla claimed he also received threats, left his hometown, and eventually abandoned his career. The new investigator dismissed the Boulder tips altogether and insisted there was no evidence Jacobo had been in the US, and the whole case was soon closed. To make matters worse, Jacobo's brother brought key documents to the police chief to reopen the case, only to be told days later that the documents had been lost. Years later, Detective Padilla summed it up bluntly: "When we were getting close to knowing Jacobo's last stop, they cut everything off. If Teresa wasn't the answer, she was at least part of the puzzle." Was this a crime of passion? By the time police officially began investigating Jacobo's disappearance, too much time had already passed. This delay gave someone the perfect window to erase evidence before investigators ever arrived. Teresa herself was seen repeatedly after Jacobo's disappearance. At the house, at the bank, even removing things with the mysterious blonde woman. Witnesses, including Jacobo's caretaker, placed her at the center of events during the critical weeks when evidence could have vanished. Then there was Teresa's mother. She claimed she hadn't spoken to her daughter in years, yet investigators uncovered phone records proving otherwise. Those calls, logged months after Jacobo vanished, suggest Teresa and her mother were still in close contact despite her denials. Taken together, these details form a disturbing picture. This was not just a marriage in trouble, it was a pattern of deception and opportunity. Jacobo's disappearance a crime of passion? Or was it the first layer of something much deeper? Or did Project Stargate have something to do with it? Some believe Jacobo's disappearance wasn't personal at all. It was political. They suspect he was abducted because of his research and connections with US intelligence, allegedly playing a direct role. Teresa's background only deepens the mystery. She reportedly had ties to the United States, claimed a degree from JFK University despite never attending, and married Jacobo without inviting a single member of his family to the ceremony. Individually, this might seem like odd details. Taken together, they form a troubling pattern. History shows that US intelligence agencies have recruited local assets abroad, sometimes even embedding them in personal relationships to gain influence or access. If Teresa's background and connections weren't what they seemed, she might have been more than Jacobo's wife. And then came in the sudden charges against Detective Padilla. Just as he was closing in on real leads, his groundbreaking studies on telepathy, mind control, and telekinesis could have been exactly what the CIA wanted. His disappearance then may not have been random at all, but the silencing of a man who had gone too far. Whether it was a jealous spouse, a covert operation, or forces we may never understand, one fact is clear. Just 1 month before vanishing, Jacobo was preparing his most ambitious test, a global telepathy replication. His goal was to prove, once and for all, that two human brains could behave like entangled particles, the very spooky action at a distance that Einstein once doubted. Whether his disappearance was connected to this research remains one of the greatest unsolved questions surrounding his life. Was he silenced, or did the truth simply slip beyond our reach? I don't know if we will ever know. For his family, Jacobo is not gone, just missing. And for his followers, his work remains a bridge between science and spirit, pointing to the possibilities far beyond what we think we know. For me, Jacobo's studies and his refusal to conform are a reminder to keep questioning the world around us. Society tried to mold him, but he fought against it, and in that fight, he uncovered truths most people are too afraid to look for or accept. His resilience pushes me to dig deeper into consciousness and the strangeness of existence, because if Jacobo showed us anything, it's that reality is far stranger than fiction. I want to hear from you. What do you think really happened to Jacobo Grinberg? Was he silenced? Did he vanish by choice? Or did something even stranger occur? Let me know in the comments.